I'm from Helsinki, as he said, and I've been working on this area of BI, or let's say user-driven information intensive systems, if you will, because the buzzwords change so often, for about 26 years. So I started with Cognos when this whole sort of market was started, if you will. And the topic of today is talk a little bit about, why data discovery, self-service is changing BI, or I guess we could also take it in a way that is it, and should it? So what's kind of happening in there? So let's spend a few minutes talking about some of the things that are really happening in that space, and what I think the potential implication of those things can be, should be, and could be in any given organization. So if we start from why and what's happening, I think this is probably the most important slide that I will have in the deck, because it's kind of, I think, ultimately outlining what is it that we are trying to do with data analytics information in this era. So if you look at this, I think it's on your right-hand side, it says systems of record. Systems of records are basically the operational data systems we've been working with for all these years. These are your ERP systems, your basically transactional systems that you operationalize the system with, where majority of budget on IT has gone for many, many years, right? Now, most of the analytics that we've been doing, it's been almost like a side story to that, right? So you put a little bit of reporting and a little bit of BI out of those into those systems to get some insight from them, but that's basically been pretty stable for over 20 years. The big change we're seeing right now is that there are these new things, we call them systems of engagement. So basically new systems that is typically used by our customers, our partners, our entire ecosystems, that basically help them engage with us. And they typically do that in a digital fashion, meaning that it always leaves a trace and it always produces new type of contextual information we never had before. These would be your websites, your mobile applications. In future, it will be your cars, right? Your navigation systems, all these types of things. And now that we combine these two things, we'll be able to create something that we call system of insight. And that should be a systemic way of approaching how company can get the most out of information. So instead of thinking about, oh, I have this, I don't know, operational ERP system, I need to put some analytics on it. When you basically put in place an operational system or system of engagement, the thinking process could be that, okay, what is that going to bring to my system of insight that allows me to manage the company smarter? So analytics becomes a target. It becomes a prime show, not the sideshow anymore when it comes to those things. And that's kind of I think the ultimate thinking, that everything we do, whether we talk about self-service or anything, is basically around that system of insight. What does it mean for us? What does it mean for our company? And how do we utilize it? So just to make it a little bit more concrete, I'll share you some of my holiday pictures from a couple of years ago from Miami in the shopping mall. I was actually walking with my son there, and one Sunday in one of those malls, and I suddenly saw a Tesla store in a shopping mall. I had to stop and take the picture. Our marketing hates this because it has a Microsoft logo on the left end. Sorry, I didn't think about it then, but it's kind of interesting. Think about it. This is an over 100-year-old industry, right? And I guess all of us being to US, you know how car business is done there. You have a massive parking lot outside the city with an American flag big as this building, and that's where they sell their, I don't know what they have these days because most of the brands are gone already, but that's how it's been. And then suddenly you walk into a shopping mall and you have a Tesla store there. That basically the car business has come into where people do their Sunday shopping. And it's kind of interesting when you look through those windows, and that kind of made me stop. It's not like a regular car store. You don't really see cars. Everything there talks personalization. It's not the best colors in the video kind of there, but you can see like they have all the color samples of interior, exterior, all kinds of things that basically talk about how do you want your car. So I started looking into Tesla a little bit. And I kind of realized that everything they do when it comes to communicating with clients, they do with online forums. They actually have massive forums where they also encourage people to use the APIs from Tesla to do something fun with their data and all kinds of things. So they're really engaging with that. That basically gives them new type of information about the engagement. That car, I don't know if anybody drives one actually. Yeah, me neither, sad. But the car actually generates about maybe 20, 30 gigabytes of data every hour. So when you think about when somebody goes and opens that door after they've driven a Tesla for a while, they have quite a lot of insight of that person. They know if that person mostly drives alone, if there are people in the back seats, do they just commute back and forth, pretty much on the same type of routes? Do they like to drive fast or not? So what kind of things in the car they would probably value most, and so on and so on. And that's all based on the potential system of insight that they can generate. And that's kind of fundamentally what this thing is all about. And why self-service analytics and why BI is so important is because that's basically the window for most people into that system of insight. That's how they get their insight from the kind of things and factors that are impacting the operations of companies. So it was already discussed a little bit. So where are we with that market? What's happened with that one? We kind of talk about it as sort of a 3-generation journey, if you will. To be honest, the BI market started as a self-service market. Okay. If I go back to days of my youth, back in 1990 when I started this thing, my customer was never CIO or any kind of a central IT shop. It was always the line of business user. It was basically a company doctor who'd be sitting there wondering that why people are having all these sick leaves. I need to analyze them, but he had to wait for IT to build them reports, to get them back, and then when he got the report, he had another question, and so on, so he had to wait in the line again to get more and so. So my typical day at work was basically, can I have some data from you, sir? So they gave me a diskette. Younger people are wondering what the heck is that, but some of you will probably recognize it. I would stick it into my laptop, I would model it into something like a data cube and give it back to the guy and let him work with it and move to the next one, the head of logistics. Hi, can I have some data, sir? And that's what we did. And that's actually how those tools got started. They got started as being very, very, very user-focused tools. Then, like it was being discussed, something happened at about 15 years ago. Companies started implementing ERP systems and they started implementing enterprise data warehouses. In other words, all that data was becoming, how would I say, more reachable for companies like the BI vendors, which was a goldmine to us. Because instead of going to every one of those users and accessing their system, you could actually go to one place to the CIO and say, you have your enterprise data warehouse, we can standardize your BI, and we basically gave birth to the generation 1 of enterprise BI platforms, such as Cognos 10, the previous platform that we have. That by fundamentally what they are, they're world-scale, I would say, reporting engines, if you will, enterprise information delivery engines. So they basically allow you to take data and move that data from any given place to any user with any given language, with proper security, governance, all that things. We did that really, really well. That's what sort of the first generation was. One thing that we is not just us, it was basically everybody who was in that boat, we kind of forgot about a little bit was in that, how would I say, great moment of building these big centralized BI systems, was that same doctor was again sitting in the office and thinking that I'm not getting all my data. I have to now, I don't queue into IT anymore, I just queue into BICC, but I'm still queuing somewhere. I'm not getting that. So the door was basically open for what I would call generation 2 data discovery vendors, if you will. The kinds of companies you hear called Tableau, ClickTech, companies like that who basically came up with the same idea. Can I have some data now? That data was actually no longer on a diskette, it's just a stream, a feed you take, and instead of putting it into Cube, you put it in memory space, but basically it's the same thing, right? And we were sort of a little bit behind on that one. Now what you're going to see with Dino, we kind of caught up on that with something we did with for example, Cognos, our enterprise BI system. We stretched that to basically cover all those things and figured it out. By now, it's not a big deal. But I think the more important thing is that what's happening next and where is the market going right now, which is basically what is the generation now that we're in now and we're sort of about to step into, if you will. And that's the area of what I would call unbiased analytics. That's the area of smarter data discovery that was being discussed, and we'll talk a bit about it. But I think the biggest thing here is that when you think about what's going to be defining BI tools and, for example, ease of use of those tools to user in the future, it will no longer be about how pretty is your pie chart or your bar chart, or how many levels of menus does the user have to click to get to a certain function, so where do you place your icons on the screen. Because to be honest, and you're going to see Dean show you a couple of things, that these things are pretty easy these days. We kind of got that to a point where it's not going to make a difference anymore. I think what you're going to see is that those tools will be differentiated and they will be valued based on what kind of insight can they provide to the user without the user knowing how to ask. How much kind of data, how much new insight can they expose from all that system of insight to the user, and how good they become at anticipating what the user wants to do next. So if I as a user realize that, okay, hey, there's something in my, I don't know, sales numbers I need to look at, system could be telling you that, by the way, the next couple of things you might want to look at are these, because they're related to what you're after, and things like that. And that's the era of smarter data discovery. It's fair to say that first steps have been taken in that space. That's something that we talked about as Watson Analytics. I guess you're going to be seeing or hearing a bit about that as well. But that's definitely where the whole thing is going. That's what's happening, and that's the era we are in right now. So I think that transition is just about to happen. Now, self-service then, even in this context, what does it mean and why, and is it for everybody? I think one of the important things to understand is that there's never going to be one thing that fits all use cases, because the reality is that every company has at least two kinds of information. One is the kind of information that you run the company with. That's basically the information that must be the same for everybody, right? So if everybody at IBM wakes up Monday morning and builds their own sales report in a self-service fashion, it'll be even a bigger mess than we are right now trying to figure out what's actually happening, right? It would never fly. So you'd always need to have certain set of data that is well governed, that is factual, and that can be trusted. But the thing is also that if that is the only thing you have, you won't enable yourself for learning. You won't enable yourself from actually taking a look at that system of insight and trying to find out what are the factors that really impact the business today. Because we typically get stuck in reporting data mostly based on reasonably fixed structures for many, many, many years. And this is not something we can afford anymore. So you need to be a lot more flexible in that, and that's where it comes from. Now, does that have potential issues with it? Of course. It basically exposes an issue that people are able to do bad analytics. Can you stop that? No. I mean, something like this is very easy to produce. I mean, that's the Brexit votes on the left side and the mad cow disease on the right side. They're about 100% correlated. I don't still think that everybody who voted for Brexit were exactly influenced by mad cow disease, right? But that's an example of a type of stuff you can produce. I mean, technically, it's very possible and very easy, right? So what do I mean by that is that when we go out and start doing self-service analytics, it's really important that we differentiate where we do it and where we don't. What are the areas where it fits, and what are the areas where we have to say that, okay, I kind of like your analysis, but before I publish it out to people as the company truth, let's talk about it a little bit, right? Let's do a little bit of governance on that one. And this is the skill set and the part that everybody needs to introduce into their organization to actually be able to do it properly. So I said a little bit about the data discovery of my youth, right? What happened. And to be honest, if you look at the data discovery of today, before the era of smart, like I said, it's not that different. It's still very biased by nature, meaning that the usual data discovery sessions start by people having some data and then having some idea about what might actually be important in that data. So typically there's a hypothesis that I have as a user that I want to prove. Hypothesis that makes me drag things into the chart and build visualization or something, that is basically what I want. And that is very, very, very prone to error and bias. And of course, the easier the tools get, the easier it is to get the result you want. So just to give you a good example, that someone like me running a business in IBM, yeah, I could very easily have a hypothesis thinking about what is a good salesperson for me. And I might be thinking that a good salesperson is the one that does a lot of customer calls. They go out to customers a lot. So what do I typically do? I take a data set about customer visits and I report the heck out of it until I actually manage to make it look like I'm right. And then I will basically position it and show it to people and you know, well, you know how the way it goes. That's a typical example of very, very, very biased way of doing self-service, and that's something I want to change. So I have the Watson Analytics slide there for the reason that it's kind of a project where we first started approaching that problem. And this was a couple of years ago, so we had a couple of ways of thinking about going into market. One thing was that let's build another visualization tool that gives you a canvas and really sexy visualizations and stuff like that, which, to be honest, has been done by many vendors already. And the other one was really to start thinking about what is it that users really want to do. What is it that business users do when it comes to sort of BI and analytics or what they want to do? So one of the things is kind of funny when we think about it as technology vendors, that we tend to be so into our technology that we actually think that people really come to work and they look outside and say, oh, it's a I don't even know what kind of day, but I guess it's a lovely day in Dublin, and it's a Wednesday. I'm going to make a dashboard today. It's not a very intelligent thought. People don't really work like that. People probably look at their numbers and figure out that what the heck happened to my pipeline in Italy, or you know, why is our returns up in this type of product category or something. And then they might want to need and have to build a dashboard or a report or an analysis to figure out why it's happening. So what we started thinking was that, would there be a way for us to basically take the question and move into the visualization without having all that hypothesis and figuring out what's causing it in between? So that's what that project was all about. So it was really about, let's take some data and put it up into the product, and we run some algorithms in the behind the scenes. So we basically sort of algorithmically interrogate the data and try to find out what insights are there in the data. And then we expose them to the user. We said, I don't know if you care, but there's actually something like this that is visible in your data set, which then the user can take and analyze further. Once they get to that data set, we basically identify what are the related things in the data that could potentially be your next question. So to give you an idea, when this product was kind of at its very early stages, I was asked to talk about it with one large company in Italy, and I met their, I think it was a digital officer or something. And so I thought, well, in the conversation, I might show him this new thing we have. So I actually took some data from US site of data.gov, which is their sort of open data site, a data source site that had something to do with it was airline accidents, actually. I took all those airline accidents and I put them into the tool, and I started showing them to the guy. And I was kind of joking because I was flying to US the next week, and you can see that the biggest rate of multi-engine failures are actually happening in the two states I'm going to, New York and Florida, and blah, blah, blah. And suddenly the guy was asking that, well, I wonder how many people died in those accidents. And at that very specific moment, you had a little icon on the screen that basically said, show me mortality rate in accidents. So all you had to do was click on that one. So the product had anticipated the next question. And that's the type of stuff Smarter Data Discovery is really all about. So fundamentally, it's different. And that's the most important thing. It's different. It's not just the fact that you're able to put things into a pretty visualization and make kind of a fancy thing like on an empty canvas. I mean, we can do that, and you're going to see some of those things. But when we talk about Smarter Data Discovery, it's really different. So, and just to state the fact, this is the most embarrassing moment of the thing, so I'm going to share you with a picture of the true love of my life. This picture is from 1990, and yes, the creature next to me there, I actually ended up marrying, and we've been married for about 23 years. But it's not her I'm talking about, it's actually the car. It's my first ever car, new car that I ever got. It has a special place in my heart. When I picked up that car, it was the first time I actually know that I can drive somewhere for more than 50 kilometers without most likely having to stop in between. So it was a Mazda 323F from 1990. So how does it fit to the story? 26 years ago, we were doing what I said was data discovery. 26 years ago, I had that car. And if you look at it today, I actually have a lot nicer car today. Actually, two of them. Most of them, both of them are a lot nicer than that one. But they haven't fundamentally changed that much. They still move me from one place to another. So when we talk about data discovery and smarter data discovery, it's not about car to car. It's basically about something else. It's really about kind of building a completely new kind of vehicle that opens that system of insight to us like nothing ever before. So that's kind of the differentiation that I think is really important to make. So it's just not the collection of prettier visualizations. Another thing to talk about when it comes to the self-service thing is that I think this is actually from I think it's called an Eckerson corporation or group, sort of an analyst company, the way they basically categorize how users use data. This is kind of a classical one where you basically have a bunch of users who are mostly consuming data, a bunch of users who do a little bit more, and so on. That's the way we've been looking at this market for a long time, also from technology perspective. So we kind of generated user experiences that users would take when they move from a step to ladder to the other one. Personally, I was never a fan of this one. I'm not a great believer on categorizing it, you're a consumer, you're a power user, and you're a super user. I think as business users, we basically change even at the course of a day a lot in the way we treat information. So to give you an idea, when I worked for Cognos, I was actually running a couple of countries at some point in time. And as a country manager, when I look at how I use data, if you want to keep your job as a leader on a software company, you better know your sales numbers. So based on the sales numbers, I was practically an analyst. I could, in any given day, figure out what was my pipeline, how was that by rep, how was that by different customers, what was the, I don't know, renewals that are coming up the next month. I mean, all that stuff. You had to do that day in, day out. So I was basically, that was part of my job. At the same time, when it comes to something like financial data, I was just a consumer. I mean, finance sent me a report that I didn't really care about, to be honest. I had a margin target, so I looked at if my margin was okay. I didn't even look at it. If there was, because I knew my sales, right, so I didn't really have to worry. If there was something wrong with margin, yeah, I might give a little bit of a thought into the cost lines to see if there's something significant there, but that's the way it is. And I think that's how most people deal with information. They have to kind of change their role based on the data that they face. So that's the kind of thing that we've been working on now when it comes to Cognos, our sort of a flagship BI product, is that we try to create what we think and call a graduated user interface. So kind of an interface that can grow with the user and where the user doesn't really have to, how would I say, learn piece of technology if they want to get somewhere, but the user interface can actually give them the ability to slide from viewing the data into perhaps slightly manipulating it into, well, let me just throw it away and build my own. And that's kind of the thinking process that we put into that one. And I think you're going to see a bit of that when Dean gets on board soon. Now, self-service doesn't stop here. Actually, quite the opposite. It doesn't stop with building a visualization, building a report or something. Actually, when you think about that system of insight and all that data that flows into it and everything, well, most of our companies are thinking about getting a lot of value out of it, you're going to need actually new kinds of roles on top of that data as well. There's going to be a lot faster requirements on getting some of those data sets, merging them together and building analysis on them. For many, many years, what we've done is that most of the, let's say, BI or data warehousing project have worked in a way that we kind of define the end state, we model a data warehouse, and we start moving data into it and reporting against it for a reasonably fixed way for a reasonably long time. A lot of that is going to change a lot more rapidly. So you might have a campaign that, I don't know, started a week ago, and then somebody wants to find out, well, how is that working? So you need to basically go out, get the data, do an analysis, and you realize that, hey, wait a minute, we're not reaching a certain group of people. So somebody might say, oops, we got to change it, so let's add, I don't know, an email campaign or let's build something on social media. And a week later, you need to get all those 3 or 4 new data sets and put them together and see where you are. So you're going to be having people like some kind of data engineers at the organization who are basically specialized in shaping that data for self-service usage. You're going to have people that could be called data scientists, or some that aren't really maybe that technologically savvy could be called citizen data scientists, but people who are actually getting their expertise in finding insight on that data and making it available to others. So things like the smarter data discovery will definitely give you some more insight from the data based on the fact that we do some algorithmic work behind the scene, but the reality is that there will actually be still quite a lot of stuff we won't be able to cover like that. A lot of stuff where you need people who are specifically building models of data that expose those insights. They could be those type of people. Of course, the business analyst that we talk about, that's of course the role that I guess we've been discussing so far, the person who is actually making the decisions and who understands the connection of data to the business and how that can be made. And then, of course, a lot of that stuff and a lot of the analytics will expose itself to users in many other forms than reports or dashboards or something like that. So you will probably, at some point in time, also embed them into operational application, those customer-facing engagements and things, and you might have developers around it, and so on. And to be able to master all that, you have to start thinking about those roles. What kind of experiences do those people need to do their job, and how they can then sort of communicate and collaborate to make it effective. That's also something we have to think of as a technology vendor. So the way we think about it, that we do things like Watts Analytics and Cognos Analytics that we clearly target the business analyst with. But we also build experiences for the data scientists, for the application developers, and thinking that how all these people could somehow be more productive and more able to kind of build that system of insight for the client. Not all of these things we can build ourselves. One of the great examples for that would be the DataWatch demonstration and talk you're going to be hearing just right after me. It's a good example that there are a lot of different types of data sets out there. Yeah, we got lots of technology in moving data and we understand a lot about it. But there's also a lot of data that is kind of hard for a traditional, let's say, analytics and BI tool. Some people call it hostile data, some people call it dark data, some people call it semi-structured data, but typically the types of data set that could be, I don't know, complicated Excel files with tabs and calculations and things, or PDF documents that are rather fixed, but we still need data from there. We actually know these guys that they're just about the best in the planet for dealing with that type of information. So instead of developing it ourselves, we basically just made an agreement with them to integrate their stuff into our portfolio and kind of act as one to be able to provide that experience, for example, potentially to the data engineer that you guys need to basically give those data sets to people that they can then analyze further. Another simple example like that is location analytics. It will be in most areas, of course, more and more important also to understand the impact of location and what that means and things like that. Would it make sense for IBM to start building a mapping solution? Not really. So we started looking at the market and basically interviewed 18 different vendors and agreed that, okay, let's focus on one of them. So we made an agreement with Mapbox, who is probably the hottest sort of a startup mapping company, if you can call them that, being about 6-7 years old. Uber uses them and so on. So we basically said, okay, let's put them in the box. So if you're using Cognos in the future, Watson Analytics, you will actually have full access to their mapping, their location solutions. You can map your data into it and do all that stuff you want to do on that. So that's kind of the way we look at the market. And just if anybody wonders, the Pitney Bowes thing there means that they have the best polygons in the market, meaning that they're able to provide exact geographical boundaries of a county in Ireland or a postal code area or something like that. So we also took their stuff and put it in as well, so the customers don't have to figure them out themselves. So those are the types of things we're working on when it comes to extending and making sure that those different user roles can be met in the future, because realistically we can't build all of it ourselves. So kind of when it comes to the whole self-service and when it comes to the whole sort of a BI discussion of today, it's definitely part of a bigger picture and part of a process. I said at one point in time that yes, any company needs to have certain amount of trusted data somewhere that is well governed, that basically allows them to run the business, right? Agree. Then you're going to have, and you need to have a requirement of learning, so to finding out what is actually important today, and that's where the self-service fits in. You can still define how do you want to run it. Do you want to govern it? Do you want to give it to everybody? That's up to you. That's basically up to you to decide on based on the skills of your people, based on the requirements and things like that. But just to give you the idea how it can work as a vendor, the fact that you're going to see the latest version of Cognos today, we have an ability, for example, for any user to come up with their own data set, upload it into the server, and build, I don't know, a dashboard in it, basically in no time. It doesn't mean everybody should, right? You can still figure out which are the people, who are the people that should be spending their time on this, and where do you do something else. That's up to you. But then at some point in time, yes, you will get into situations where the business is changing and you need to be basically staying on its pulse and being able to analyze those different things that come into it just about every day, and use that to alter also your operational reporting and your sort of I would say standard and trusted communication, and then of course develop it. I mean, coming up with areas where you might need to deploy a predictive model or something fancy to operationalize the analytics that you find. And it's an ever-growing circle. hopefully I get a chance to talk to you in some time, I don't know, in a year and two, and I can tell you we figured out something else. It might be that the next great thing is, I don't know, but it's guaranteed that as information keeps on growing, that system of insights keep on growing, and the demand of getting more out of it will become bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's my story for the morning. You're now going to see kind of more exciting stuff than slides, so the gentlemen are going to also show you what those products do and what they're there for. There's a couple of links. You guys will get the presentation, so if anybody wants to try out some of those things, and just feel free. And thank you so much.